Hey, what's going on, guys? It's a little bit different video this time. I was reading through some of the comments over a week ago, probably something like that, and I came across a comment. It's not a bad comment, and I'm not saying anything negative about it or the person that wrote it. But it was a comment that I hear a lot. Um, well, let's say I've heard it a lot through my life, and I've even used the comment before. Um, and the comment is, oh, what it would be like to be retired with money. Okay. So let me tell you guys, being filthy rich it's not easy. Just kidding. All right, look. That comment is kind of what drove me to this video because I want to talk a little bit about my background. Okay. I hope I don't bore you too much. But so when I was growing up, we grew up in a middle class family. Didn't make a lot. Didn't We just were comfortable. Okay. I had a grandmother that I would stay with on occasion, and my grandmother was a Christian lady, very nice, spiritual. She always was the type to read her Bible, pray all the time. And then the other side of the family, some of them had alcohol abuse issues. So I grew up both sides, seeing two different kinds of lives. All right. So I'm going to try to drag you through this as quick as I can. So growing up, um, I hated school. My dad, at the time, my stepdad was, he told me basically that, if you don't like it at 10th grade, um, I could get out, but you're going to do something with your life. You're not going to just drop out of school. So he forced me to make sure I get a GED. So I did that at 10th grade. And then I started working at 15 years old. And I worked with a best friend and his dad. His dad owned a tree service company. And I worked with him. I was the brush guy. So it was very hard labor. And we got paid very little, $25 for a half day, $50 for a full day's labor, and hard work, hard labor. So I did that for a little while with him. And then my dad, I worked with him at a car dealership. He was a service writer. And I would be the porter, to run errands, get parts, run the cars to the back to the guys and stuff. Um, so I did that for a little brief period. And then we wound up going on vacation to Colorado up into Durango, and I met a girl. And I was young at the time. I was like maybe 17, somewhere around there, 18, close to 18. And I met this girl. I really liked her a lot. And I asked my dad if I could stay there at my aunt's house, and while everybody else left and went back. And he said, okay, as long as your aunt is okay with it, that's fine, under one condition. We leave in like 2 or 3 days, and you have to have a job before we leave. And I was like, oh, okay. So my girlfriend's dad knew somebody in construction, a foreman in construction, and he got me in as a laborer. So I started working with hand tools, basic hand tools, doing remodeling, new construction, so forth. And I did that for 3 years. During that time, they pulled me out from the field and they put me in the shop where there was a guy that did metalworking, and his name was Pat, and an older guy, very nice spoken man. And every day he was like, I'm going to teach you how to weld. You're going to learn how to weld with a stick welder, or yeah, stick welder first, and then you're going to learn the MIG welder. So I said, okay. And, it was just interesting because every day before we would start work, the guy would pray. He's like, we're going to pray. And then at lunch, we would pray. So these little things were instilled kind of slowly, as my grandmother, these things just through life. And so then fast forward, I would work with some guys in that same field that they left, and they'd be, start their own construction company and say, hey, you want to come over here and work for us? We'll pay you more. So I would do that, and so construction is very not stable, at that time, and depends on which maybe field you get into, and if you're union or not. But anyways, so I did that, and then all of a sudden, after about 3 years or so, my cousin calls me and says, hey, your cousin is going to the police academy, and you should go with him. And I didn't really hesitate. I just said, okay, I'm going to do it. I didn't have the money. It was like $2,400, I think, at the time, to go through the academy, to get post certified for the state of Colorado. And so I was scrounging around. I had an '86 Toyota pickup that I tried to go to the bank and borrow money on, and 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 that didn't work. So I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to just go up there and see what happens. So I did, and I got a grant. And through the grant, they paid half of that. So I wound up financing, basically through a student loan, the other half. So it was like 1,200. It was like $1,250 is what I had to pay, and it was, piddly $50 a month or something like that. But I paid it off, and I wound up getting a job in law enforcement. And so I worked there for a small department, and they didn't pay that great, but it was consistent. It was a good job. And immediately I was able to go get a loan for, I lived in a travel, like not a travel trailer, but a regular, like a 16 by 80 mobile home. And it was set up in a mobile home park. And so I paid the rent and paid the mortgage on that. And it's funny because I couldn't even get a loan for a car barely working in construction. They were like, you know, that's not consistent. But you get a job in law enforcement, oh, no problem. So so I did that. I worked for that department for about 3.5 years. And then I came to Las Vegas with a friend to the SEMA show. And I talked to a couple of Metro officers that were sitting at a buffet, and they were getting ready to eat. And I wanted to ask them about the department. So um, they told me a little bit about it, and that they loved it, and it was a great department. So I applied, and it took about a year to get in. Finally got in the department, went through another academy, and I started out making double the amount of money. Now at the time, I'm like 25 years old, so I didn't think about retirement and future. I was just thinking about the dollar, at the moment. Like, hey, this pays a lot more, like double the amount than what I was making at the other department. So I worked there. That was my first year. I had met a girl that was in Durango, and I brought her out, and we lived together. And then things fell apart with her and I, and that sent me through a really hardship, and in it, a real hardship. I mean, I just really, um, I wasn't really fit for that, that kind of a breakup. And so I went through a hard time. And at that time, I decided, I was like, well, I have a decision to make. I can either go out to strip clubs and drink and, start that kind of life, or I can go the way like my grandmother and like Pat, and all these other people would do. It seemed like their life was more peaceful, and that's the direction I went. So I started, reading my Bible and praying and doing those things, and I was more at peace. That's the only thing that brought peace into my life during the hardship I went through. So now, during this time, I was a single parent. I had had previous relation with that girl. It was that I met in Durango, and we had a child, and and then we had split up. So now this is now I'm completely alone, and I have a 6-year old son, and I had custody of him. And every few years, I would get in the mail, some notification from an attorney that, his mother was trying to fight me in court and take my son away. And it was very stressful time. So I kind of know what that's like, and have a feeling for people that go through these kinds of things. And all these things, these hardships are designed, in my opinion, for a purpose. And it's to help us to be stronger and to help other people through their trials and tribulations. So, what I did was eventually he was 10 years old. And after about 11 years of having him alone, this was actually, I had him for, it couldn't be 11 years. Yeah, it was 11 years because he was 13. I'm sorry. So, but they started working on him at 10 years old. Like, hey, you come move with us, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, bribes. And, and of course, he didn't know any better. He's 10 years old and they were making promises that he was thinking they were going to keep. And so he thought life was greener on the other side. So I said, look, he wasn't even supposed to go. It was visitation rights was parented only, or I'm sorry, it had to be parent visitation on her end was supposed to be supervised. That's how bad it was. And I was like, look, and actually she got decreased supervision times when we finally went to court. So it wound up that I said, look, that's not right. I'm going to let him come visit for the summer, and we're just going to leave it at that. He needs that both parent interaction. And so he would go, but every time he would come back, it was a battle every time because he got everything he wanted over there. He was spoiled rotten, and then talked to the whole time. So so he and I would butt heads constantly, and it just became where it wouldn't. It would, after he'd get back, it would smooth out for a while, and then it would just pick back up again. But it got to the point where every time he would go, it would get worse. It would never smooth out, and so we just butted heads. And I said, "Look, if you want to live over there for a while, then you go right ahead. After the school year, you're welcome to go over." And so he did. He made that choice. So afterward, I was home. I was alone. I had a good job, and I worked and made middle class income. That's it. Very simple. I've always been into cars. Just always tinkering with cars, and that was just kind of always my thing. I don't know why, but I wound up. I would buy something that I liked, and then I would play with it for a little while, and then I'd be like, well, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, and then I would pedal it. And sometimes I break even, sometimes I lose, sometimes you make money. So that's kind of the way that went for a long time. And I was just like that, and I won't get into the Lamborghini thing in this video yet, but I can talk about it in another video because it's a lengthy one. But anyways, um, so I would do that, and on my middle class salary, I would just keep doing the same thing. And I was staying busy, and it was teaching me things. And during this time, I developed a relationship with my biological father, which lived in Tucson, Arizona, and he built cars. He had a company, or a business rather, that he worked by himself in his shop, and his name was Carlson's Creations. And so um, and he built custom motorcycles. He built his own hot rods, street rods, things like that, and a lot of paint work for people. So I would go visit him, and so both my dads, my stepdad knew more about the mechanical side, and then my biological father was more of a kind of fabricator body guy, custom kind of thing. So I learned a little bit from both, and and then I just kind of started doing my own thing, just building and just trying to enjoy things. And so, and after you do that so long, you wind up just, that's how I am today. I wind up with this vehicle or that vehicle. And it just, I knew before I retired from the department, from this department, I knew I wanted to like stay at home, and I just wanted to build like four-wheel drives, and try to sell them, and just to keep me busy. And then I realized that the four-wheel drives I wanted to buy, like old carbureted stuff, they're like kind of classics now. They're not cheap. So that idea fell by the wayside. And so that's kind of when I started dabbling into Humvees a little bit. And then I met somebody that did Humvees, and I kind of did one, and then he kind of like the way he was talking about him, it kind of struck my interest again in him. So that's how I got back into Humvees. And but I want to say that, I there's one time in my career that I was like, you know what? If I ever came into money, like real money, I was like, the first thing I want to do is I want to be responsible and I want to pay off my house. That's what I wanted to do, because I've heard of some people doing that, focusing on work. There was a couple people I worked with that did that, and they doubled up on their payment. They got rid of their mortgage, and I was like, before I retire, if I have a mortgage to pay, that's just less money in my pocket and less for me to be able to do and have freedom with. So I decided, one time I was like, if I ever come into this money, I'm gonna go ahead and I want to pay off my house. And you know what? The opportunity came up. I was called into Hollywood, and I'm just kidding. Here's the opportunity, guys. The opportunity was, I'm by myself now. I don't have my kid anymore. Everything's like stagnant. So I worked overtime. And there was times where we didn't have that much overtime, but this period of time there was tons of it, and like you could work every day. And so I did. I worked a lot, and I worked so much that I was able to take that money and directly pay it on my mortgage and pay it off. So now I make less money being retired than I did when I was working, but because I don't have a mortgage, it helps. It helps me get by. So all I do now is I do these little projects to keep me busy, you guys. I'm a firm believer in prosperity, and I believe that, as time has gone on, I have gotten a closer walk with God. There's no doubt. And that's one of the things that I've learned is it takes sometimes hard work to get somewhere in life. And as long as we're preoccupied, in our phones, TV, things like that, video games, it's really hard to progress, and prosper in life. So, the Bible says that idle hands are a devil's workshop. And so, my goal here, what I do is all I do is try to stay busy, guys. That's all I do, and I try to use whatever savings I have here and there just to stay busy, keep going, keep moving, because I don't like staying stagnant. I like to always do things and accomplish things. And I was in Lowe's yesterday, and I couldn't believe it, guys. I really couldn't believe that. Some guy was using the urinal and had his phone in his face at the same time. I'm like, this is how bad it's gotten, and I see it all over. And when you see things like this, I don't keep up with the news a lot, because I don't know what to believe. It's just too tough to try to follow. But what I do is I watch the news and I line it up with biblical things, because the Bible is based on, um, it's based uh, on well, I'm forgetting the word. Anyways, but it's based on prophecy, and we know that, there's going to be hard times coming. That it's written in there. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. And so, I would like to prepare physically and spiritually for these things. And so, you know my message to you is, it doesn't take money to prosper. Okay. but it takes will, it takes a desire, will, and it takes action. Okay. You can't prosper with all these electronics things going on. It's a distraction. That's what it is. And so, and whatever you do to prosper, this is my advice. Every day, I do what David said to do, and that is I put God before me no matter what. So when I get up, I thank God for the day. Um, in the middle of the day, I thank Him for allowing me to work on these things and be busy. And then always at night, I read my Bible, I pray, and I thank Him. So whatever I do, I make sure I include God in everything. I put Him first. And I'm not preaching to you people to go to church and do all this stuff. I'm just telling you what I do. And it's brought me a lot of peace in my life. And it's been able to give me um, things to do that's clean. If you're a guy and you like these kinds of things to do at home and you have a family, as long as you're taking care of your family, your wife should support you, because it's better. My grandmother used to tell me, well, what you're doing is better than being out at a bar, or something like that. Um, so it's a good thing, to always build things and learn. And so that's the advice I would give. And it doesn't take money, guys. It really doesn't. There's a lot of things that we spend money on that's unnecessary. When I go on trips or when I go places, I make sandwiches. I don't eat out every single time I go somewhere, because it's unnecessary. You can make healthier food and less expensive. You don't have to buy name brand clothes, and you don't have it. Just the list goes on and on. I don't drink and smoke, so you know I don't have money appropriated for those things. Another important thing is health. you know the Bible says that I would that you prosper in health above all things. And so I know that our health is so important. It's number one. And as long as we can stay healthy, we can keep moving and be agile and do things for as long as possible in our lives. Um, and, a lot of people, a lot of expense goes to medications, it goes to doctors, doctor visits and so forth. So, it's these are things that we have the choice to cut out of our life if we want to focus on something, a dream that we have. And I remember years ago, Arsenio Hall, Jean-Claude Van Damme, I used to really like that guy a long time ago. And I remember him saying something to Arsenio Hall that stuck with me through the years. And he said, as long as you have two hands and 2 feet, you can do anything, you know? And it's true. It's very true. But the thing is you don't want to take all the credit. I always give God the credit. So, everything that I do, I try to walk in a simple life. And I hope that, maybe this video can encourage somebody else to maybe think about that. Think about the ways. Sometimes I sit at a traffic light and I think, how many people have God on their mind right now? You know, how much garbage is in our minds through the day that we allow? They say like we think like 80,000 thoughts in a day. So how many of those are on just trash, drama? So um, I believe in living a peaceful and simple life, and it doesn't take money to do that, guys. But I believe in staying busy, staying active, keeping your mind learning all the time. And that's it, guys. I'm gonna call this video. Hey, I don't like trends. I'm not into them. But we got like porch talk, we got truck talk. I'm gonna do truck camper talk. So, anyways, I don't know. Maybe it's already out there. Who knows? But I hope you guys enjoy this video. I know it's a little long, but I wanted to give you a little bit about my background and let you know I'm an average person, man. I make an average salary. I'm just doing something different with my money than other people may do with theirs. And I'm not knocking anybody for what they want to buy and how they want to spend their money, but that's how I'm doing it. And so I'm not rich, you know, and so I just want to encourage you to get out and just try the best you can and get to work. That's it. Get to work. Start learning something. If you have any questions, if there's anything I can help with, just let me know. All right. So you guys have a good evening and you take care.